I'll share my screen. Okay. I think everyone can see it, right? I can't see you guys, but
Yes.
okay. So this is Jacob. He is a student in my second grade class. He was a student of mine last year in my first and second grade multi-age class, so he's looped with me. And last year, around this time, his reading skills had started to plateau. He went into our Title I reading services, and he spent most of the year in services with our Title I teacher and made a lot of growth. So he entered second grade at about an H reading level, which is 2 levels behind what he should have left first grade at. And now this year, he's really just being progress monitored. He wasn't far enough behind to get into our title services this round. So now we're progress monitoring him. And the book that he is about to read is a level I book using the Fountas and Pinnell leveling system. And right now, a second grader should be around an instructional K. So here is Jacob. And I think we should be able to hear it.
The best cat.
I'm going to give you a little summary of the book first, okay? So this little boy's name is Spencer, and he went to a farm to pick out the perfect cat for him. But he has trouble finding which one might be the best cat. So we're going to find out how he chooses the best cat on the farm. Can you read that title again?
The best cat. The best cat.
Our little boy's name is Spencer.
Spencer wanted a cat more than anything in the world that he wanted a cat. The world sleep on his bed and purr in his ears and be his best funny friend. Please, can I get a cat? Spencer asked. I really want one. Are you sure? His mother answered. It is hard work to take care of a cat. I'll take good care of him, said Spencer. I'll promise I'll brush him and feed him and give him water every day. Oh, really? Said his mother. Let's go to Apple Tree's farm. Maybe we can get a cat there. Spencer and his mother went to Apple Tree's farm. They
there a word solving strategy you can use?
You're starting to
that
sound
word.
it out.
Sound it out. Can you point to the word you're stuck on?
Word.
That's a good strategy for that one. Do you see a snap word in that word?
And.
And. So you know the first chunk of that word. Could you give it a really good guess now that you know the first chunk? Animals.
Animals live in the farm. They were cows and horses and the fields were was
Is there a sight word that you know on that word?
friendly farmer, and there were cats everywhere.
Ah, right. Okay. So that was the end of his reading. We didn't read the whole book, just about 130 words, I believe. And then total, he had 16 errors and 1 self-correction. And then there were 3 teacher assists. So, yeah.
I have a question. Did you count? Here comes my dog. Did you count the teacher assists as errors?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay,
so
just wondering.
19 errors. Sorry, I didn't count those as errors. It should be 19 errors then.
No, I didn't want to correct you. I was just thinking,
No.
wow, I don't have close to 16. Maybe you counted the teacher one.
That's okay. No, I completely forgot to add those in. So it should be 19 errors. I
Okay.
counted those separately.
Well, now I'm even farther away from that number.
Yeah, he made a lot of errors, and a lot of them were small. So we could talk about the bigger ones that he did make. There was also, I feel like he kept reading Sprinter for Spencer. So I only counted one of those as an error because that is a proper noun. So I didn't count the rest. I just counted one. So, but yeah, his first error was an insertion when they were reading. It said Spencer wanted a cat more than anything in the world, and then he said that he wanted a cat.
Well, let's not get too far. Let's take a minute and let people kind of collect themselves before we start talking.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
All righty, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
What was his name again? Oh, sorry.
Jacob. I forgot I was on mute. Jacob.
Thank you.
All right, well, so why don't we make our way through? And as Hannah was saying, let's look at that first insertion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, here the sentence before was, Spencer wanted a cat more than anything in the world that he wanted a cat that. I marked the insertion.
Well, you can't say.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Lydia.
I'm kind of guessing a little bit of meaning and syntax. Meaning because like to him, he's thinking the cat that did that, or I think in his head, maybe that made sense. And then I think also he didn't want somehow the sentence to end with, I think it was wanted, that he wanted more. So to him, it like sounded like there should be more. Those are kind of guesses, but that's my guess.
That's what I had said too. I think it felt like he kind of just ignored the period and wanted the sentence to continue, and probably what he was thinking probably would have made sense and have sounded right too. So I said structure.
Yeah, because it did kind of sound like he put a period at the end, at it kind of in the middle of the next sentence.
Mm-hmm.
He was adjusting his own syntax.
Right.
Nice job, guys. How about what was the next one?
The next one was, he read world for wood in the sentence, he wanted a cat that would sleep on his bed and purr in his ear and be his best furry friend. So we had read world for wood.
I think that's only visual. It doesn't make sense, and it also wouldn't fit in a sentence. So he was using the WO and
I
maybe
didn't
that.
know, yeah. I didn't know if it would also be structure because he just read the word world 2 sentences above or 2 lines above. So if he's still thinking about the word world, he may have just pulled that from what he had just read. So.
Well, and that might be even more meaning though than structure, because it's not like it's a repeated book talk kind of thing. So it might be just that he's thinking about world in terms of the story, and it just popped up for him again.
Mm-hmm.
But so that would be more meaning than structure, but definitely visual, right? That's the strongest one there for sure. And then he said, did he say ears for ear? Is that the next one?
Ears for ear.
So guys, what do you think about that?
What did he say? Can you repeat that?
He said ears for ear in part of the sentence and purr in his ears and be his best furry friends. But it was ear.
Thanks for the, oh, Lydia, go ahead. Thanks for
I
this.
almost think the ears could have been all 3. That's what I marked it as, because I think it could fit into any of those categories based on especially the sentence. It kind of made sense. It kind of sounded right. It's based on the first chunk. He just added 1 word or letter.
Yep. Yeah, because really, I mean, they are talking about ears. Yeah, that, yep. It's a nice thick error. And the next one, is that funny for fuzzy?
It was funny for furry.
Furry. Oh, I can't read my writing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think is going on there? You want to read the sentence again, Hannah? That was really helpful.
So this chunk of the sentence was, and be his best furry friend, but he read funny.
Lydia?
And even that I feel like could be all three because it could possibly fit into making sense, sounding right, and visual. He had that F. So like I wrote funny for furry, that the F made sense. And even the double consonants, which is just interesting. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but I just found that as an interesting observation.
You know what's funny is I actually didn't even notice that because when I had the text so small, I thought he read it like I thought that was the same word because it looks so similar.
Yeah.
So, word shape is a big piece of this because you're predicting and checking. And obviously, Alyssa, you were using word shape, when you couldn't make it out. And that's a very common thing. I remember we used to put our word wall words up and we draw kind of a big red line around the outside for the word shape. So it's very likely he was using that for sure, I think.
Is the word shape thing visual or is it structure of the word?
Nope. There is no structure of the word.
Okay.
It's structure of syntax of the sentence. So you need more than one word for structure. So if it's structure of the word, if you're thinking that, you're good.
Okay.
Definitely. And world and wood fall into that category too. Of lookalikes. As far as shape, I think. Yeah. So there's a couple things, maybe, a couple pieces of data that might support that. So what came next?
Sprinter for Spencer.
So let's do this one time, like you said. What do you guys think? Now you told him Spencer early on, I believe.
Yeah, that was the first word of the text, so I prompted him because it was the proper noun, but he didn't remember throughout.
Did he get it right the first time when you said it?
Yeah, after I had told him he read it correctly, but then he didn't read it correctly any other time.
So what do you guys think was happening there? Kind of tricky.
What word did he say again?
Right.
So he said sprinter for Spencer. Like a
Sprinter?
runner. Sprinter. Yeah, like a runner.
Okay.
Like he's.
Well, I would think it would be definitely visual because the S is probably where he got it from. It's not a name. It's not, it might be a name, but probably not one he's familiar with. That it's probably just based on that S that, hey, here's an S word I know, I'm going to go with it, is my guess.
And it has more than S too, actually. I'm looking at it. S, P, N, E, R. It's got a similar shape, not exact, but pretty close. There's a lot of visual in there. And really, when you're talking names, if he knows, structurally, if he knows that this is a name, there's a lot of things that could, names are pretty varied. So Sprinter could have been the name, if he just got it, forgot what Spencer, then kind of was on his own and said, I think it's Sprinter, using visual. But with that secondary, do you guys think he knew it was a name?
I don't think he realized it was a name.
Oh, you don't?
So, well, he said it like the same throughout. So maybe that is an indication that he knew like this was a character in the story because he did keep it the same throughout. So yeah, maybe he did know. There's not many other names that start with like the SP blend, so he probably was just grasping for something. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of one. I can't
Mhm.
think of one.
So yeah, maybe he did think it was a name just because of the repetition and the consistency of the error.
Maybe. I mean, let's make a small s because, that one I'm just guessing on, but it's possible. All right.
The next error was in the sentence, I really want one. He said, I really wanted one.
Wanted a one instead of wanted one.
Oh, I just have, I really wanted one.
And it's interesting you said that because I wrote down an insertion of a. I wrote down a one instead of ed. So I apparently misheard.
I did too, actually.
Wait,
Okay. Maybe he did insert one and I missed it. But
No,
yeah,
no,
I,
Might have been somewhere else. I don't know, because I had adding a for the word one.
so, okay, wait, say it again, Hannah. What
So
did you,
the only error that I recorded was I really wanted one when the word should have been want. But I could have missed something.
wait, I really wanted one instead of I really
Want one.
want one. Oh, I get it. Right, and I really want one. I really want a one. And we could have, you were right there. So,
No. But yeah, I have to go back and listen again. I only have wanted for want.
okay, all right. Well, let's go with that because she was the one that was there. So I'm always going to go with that. So wanted for want. So what do you think that was? Using that is.
It could be all three of them. I mean, it visually is almost identical. It works structurally. It doesn't really change the meaning of it.
Yeah. And there is meaning in that word and it's still, it stays. Yeah. So, yeah, another nice meaty miscue. And next, Hannah?
In the sentence, it says, I promise, but he said, I'll promise.
Was that the one where it said, I'll promise I'll?
I'll read the sentence before it. It said, I'll take good care of him, said Spencer. And then he said, I'll promise, instead of I promise.
So what do you guys think that was?
But even that could be all three because it's based on what he looks like, sounds like, and seems right. So I think that could fit in all three also.
Yep.
The next sentence after does begin with I'll again. It says, I'll brush him and feed him and give him water every day. So I don't know if he was kind of picking up on the structure, like all of the sentences around this one started with I'll, so he could have just picked up on that pattern.
Yep, that's a possible. Let's put that also. So, well, and we said MSMV plus S. So there's really good, strong evidence for S, right?
And then the next error he made was in the sentence, I'll brush him and feed him. And he said, I'll brush him and field him.
What do you think?
I mean, it makes sense.
Field?
Oh, did he add an ed to it?
Yeah, like field.
Oh, I thought field. Is that what you said?
Field, yeah, field.
I'm not sure.
I thought it was just FEEL. So
And I wrote down FIELD, like a field, because that's what I
That's what I wrote down too. Yeah. Hmm.
that makes a difference, then it doesn't make sense. So.
Field instead of feed, for sure. It doesn't make sense.
So then it's probably visual based on the F that he's doing.
Visual, very strong visual. What's next?
When it says all right, he says all really.
Yeah. What was that? That was one of my favorites. Well, it's definitely got an R.
I think he was just sticking with the visual pattern of kind of, if I don't know a word, I'll kind of find one that starts with the same letter.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say visual.
Definitely, definitely. All right. What was the next?
Next one was a self-correction, his only self-correction. All right said his mother, and he said mom, and then self-corrected it back to mother.
Ah, that's what he said. So what was mom first? Mom for mother.
That's definitely meaning.
Mom for mother is visual and perhaps meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about structure.
Well, definitely visual because
Oh, because the beginning sound and the beginning letters,
right? And mom for mother is meaning because
because they mean the same, pretty much.
they sure do. And can you say said his mother or says his mom?
Yeah, so all three.
All three. And then how did he fix it? How did he realize it had to be fixed even?
I don't think I remember the sentence.
Well, he just went mom and then said mother. How would he? And that was the end of the sentence.
Visual.
I think so. I think it had to be visual because there's nothing else that's going to really alert it, right?
Right.
Good job. Good job. Was
Then-
trees? Was that next?
In the next sentence, he read trees for tree. He just added the S on to trees. An apple tree farm, the name of the farm.
Probably all three. You could justify each of them. Looks right, sounds like, seems right. So yeah.
Absolutely. And did you say that one again? Was that the next?
He said that one again, and he also made another error on Spencer, so I'll skip past that one.
Okay.
Then the next error in the sentence, many animals lived on the farm. He said may for many.
And really, he read this really slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So may for many. What was going on there? That's the beginning of the sentence, so there's not a lot of structure happening here.
right, I was just going to say visual, and that he just missed the N in the word, so I can't really see any. There's no meaning behind it, and there's really no structure. So
Yeah, just really, really V. Focusing out on V here. And then animals. He got some nice support there.
Yeah, and then he ended up guessing answered for animals.
Answered?
Answered, yep.
So what answered for animals? What was he using?
There was another time that he did read answered correctly back on page 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have it marked as like possibly structure because he did ponder that word for a while. So if he was just thinking of or maybe more meaning, if he was thinking more of the like meaning of the story, if he thought back to when he read answers the first time, he might have been pulling that from previously. But so I guess that would be meaning.
So meaning, possible structure, and then visual, of course. It's got the A's again. So he's, for something that seems pretty far off, he's doing a lot of work here.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see he was like using his, I mean, he really was, he spent a while looking.
Well, I really wanted to know what he was trying to use. If he was trying to use the picture clue, that's why I was trying to prompt him without giving an answer. So yeah, but ultimately I gave it to him. So, but yeah, he was doing a lot of work on that one.
Well, and he was, you know, he was saying it silently. When you asked, he said, "I'm trying to sound it out," which is awesome. I mean, he knows. I mean, obviously, I guess in Title I he got some strategy talk, and so he knows how to look at what he's doing and a little bit.
Definitely.
That's a huge plus.
His next error was a small one. In that same sentence, many animals lived on the farm. He read in for on.
In for up.
In for on.
On. Thank you. In for on. Right, of course. So what do you guys think was lived in the farm, lived on the farm?
Probably meaning and structure because both of those could work. It's kind of a similar word in both cases.
It could fit.
Next error in the next sentence, he read.
And visual, because it's a short word with an N at the end. All right, let's keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Next error, he read they for there in the sentence, there were cows and horses in the field. So he read they were cows and horses in the field.
You know, I've heard that more and more, even on newscasts. I think that might be becoming some kind of dialect or colloquialism that I see commonly now. But they for there. What you think is going on?
Can you repeat the sentence again?
Yeah. There were cows and horses in the field. But he read they were cows and horses in the field. To me, his error doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound right to me. So I was just gonna say it was visual. I don't know. It didn't sound right. It sounded funny.
And that's what I was going to say also. It just has the THE and nothing really else at that point.
That certainly could be. What's the next one?
Oh, and then this was the last one. This was another teacher assist, friendly. He ended up getting this one, but after a long pause and with the prompt of, do you see a sight word in that word that you know? And he saw friends, so then he got friendly.
And I thought the sight word he was going to say was going to be end, not friend. I mean, he had the whole thing.
So yeah, I guess he was using visual cues to read it, and then he read it correctly. So
Quite a bit. And so, yeah. So what do you guys, what patterns do you see here, guys?
mainly using visual meaning and structure, or just visual as his pattern?
Those were the two most common errors, where he had something that was really close usually. Well, even he was using lots of cues on some of them, or he was just using structure. I mean, just using visual.
I have a question. That reading seemed kind of like less like our regular day-to-day speech. Like one of the sentences started with "and." So I just wonder if children, because they kind of, they kind of read how they speak, if it was extra challenging, because he wanted to kind of make it make sense. And then in some parts, like you guys said, he was making it end at different points. And I noticed at the end of the reading, "and" was at the beginning of a sentence. So I was just wondering if that could add to an additional challenge.
Absolutely. If the book talk doesn't match your own talk, and that can really it just throws an extra layer of difficulty onto it, and that very well may be. I mean, certainly he didn't predict where the periods were going to go, so and that kind of threw him off. And maybe he's not using those as well as kind of hints. But that tells you a lot right there, right? That he's not using the periods to understand kind of how the sentence is constructed. So kind of that combination of visual and structure. But yeah, I still remember we had I don't know if I told you this story about I still remember this book where it talked about basically one box being in another box, but they didn't say it that way. They said, in the blue box was the green box. And I just avoided that book like the plague, because every kid I gave that to, they would read it the first time, the blue box is in the green box, and then they'd have to go back, and it was like pulling teeth every page. Just because the structure was so foreign to them, it was uncomfortable. They understood what it said, they knew how to get there, but just to read it that way was a challenge, and that could be some of what's going on here. And for a kid that worked at things as hard as he does, I was surprised he didn't have more self-corrects.
He doesn't correct himself very often. When he reads, he's very few self-corrections.
That's really interesting. It's like
Those are rare ones.
he works a lot ahead of time quietly in his head. Whoop. Yeah. It's like he thinks you have to work ahead of time and then you can't go back or something. I don't know. But he did have a pretty prominent pausing behavior and working behavior. Like he would just sit there until he came up with that precious guess. Yeah. So not a lot of meaning, really. Is that what you've encountered, Hannah?
Yeah, and he is attending to the meaning while he's reading, because his comprehension at the end will be very strong, like a literal and inferential comprehension. He just doesn't quite use that as a word-solving skill. Like, he knows he has to pay attention to it, but he doesn't know how to use that as a word-solving skill yet. It's something all of us is working on. So not many of my kids are very strong in the meaning area yet. So it's not just him. I think it's something that's still developing in second grade. So.
Well, and in second grade, you kind of ramp up the focus on meaning, and and so he's focusing on getting meaning out for the end. But that piece is a lot harder.
Yeah, having looped up from first grade, pretty much all of the strategies that I taught last year were visual strategies, looking for a vowel team, looking for blends, chunking it out. And this year we just started to dive into thinking about what's happening, what would make sense, things like that. So yeah, so he's pretty used to those visual cues.
Right. That, that explains it. So, that he hasn't really been exposed. So now is where he's using it, and he is using meaning, which is really encouraging. He is using it for the end. So it's just a matter of transferring that. It won't be as hard as it would be with a child that really thinks you're not supposed to get meaning out of a text at all. So yeah, that's great. Fantastic. I realize he's not struggling much, but do you talk about why he fell behind and what you think was going on there?
Yeah, so my instructional coach and I actually talked about him after he had done his PALS assessment in the fall, and we had noticed a really big gap in his phonological awareness skills, just of segmenting and blending. When you told him the sounds of a word like at, he really struggled to blend them back together, and then he struggled to segment like words by himself. And then another gap was rhyming. A lot of times we'll read a book in class and he'll be the first one to shout out, well, that's a rhyming book, and it's nowhere near a rhyming book. So phonological awareness skills just aren't in place yet, and I think he's memorized a lot of reading, but I don't think he'll be a solid reader until some of those early foundational skills are more secure for him.
And that makes sense. So he's really focusing on that visual as part of, as connected with the sounds, the phonological. Well, that's amazing. That makes a lot of sense. So that may have come from a kindergarten piece.
Right, and when he was coming in first grade, he was on grade level, leaving kindergarten. He came in reading at the right where he should have been, and it was around this time in first grade where his skills really started to plateau, and that's when you start to see more of the trickier spelling patterns, more than like the 3-sound words, the words with blends, or even like an ing ending or something. So I think there's some gaps that need to be filled. So.
Okay. Well, and remembering that, our brains aren't completely wired for all this until 7, he might have been just one of those kids that wasn't quite wired up, He's
also a very late summer birthday. I believe his birthday is in late July. So he really did just turn 7 this past summer. So, yeah.
So he's ready to go. All righty. Wonderful. Now, I see I have a couple of chats. Oh my. Okay, cool. All right, and you're back. So, anywho, is there anybody else? Thank you, Hannah. I should say, round of applause. Congratulations. You are off the hook. Don't have to think about videos for the rest of the term. So is there anybody else that was going to go today? I forgot to look at the list. Take that as a no. Usually people know pretty quickly when they're on the block. So okay. So what I'd like to do now is, oops. Is go to well, first, actually, before we go there, let's talk, let me do a question and answer kind of thing about how are you feeling about, if I can get you back up here. There we are. All right. Now I see you again. How are you feeling about the ePortfolio assignment? I know that next week we don't have class because I'm not crazy having class the night before Thanksgiving. So I won't see you for 2 weeks, and when you come back, you're supposed to have your ePortfolio, or at least one standard from your ePortfolio ready to present. Now, are you feeling good about that? Have you not looked at it? Are there questions I can answer? Let me know. Yes, Lydia.
And I spent 3 minutes on it, so I didn't look intensely by any means. I was just looking before class, and you can create the e-portfolio. Do we we just choose a specific standard and add it in, or should it automatically be there? I guess that was just my question.
It won't automatically be there. It is my understanding that Canvas doesn't do it that way. We have to kind of do it ourselves. But I'm still trying to figure out if there is a possibility for me just giving you a template. I mean, that's so much easier. So I'll work on that. But at this point, there is no such animal. So give it a try. And again, if you, as a reminder, if you guys aren't able to do the tech part, feel free to do a Word document or a PowerPoint or something. And this is kind of a test run for me anyway. So if a lot of you have difficulty, I'll know, I've got this is a necessary piece. I'm going to have, I'll go to the Canvas people and get them to add that to our thing if possible, or if most people are pretty good with it, then I'll know, okay, this is something I might be able to kind of deal with in class.
Okay, so my question was, you do want us to try and actually upload into the e-portfolio, like create one portion of our e-portfolio.
I want you to try.
Okay, want us to try, but if for some reason that doesn't work, we can present it as like a Word document.
Without any problem at all. But I do want to hear about, whether it was easy or not.
I have a question. So you said to choose a standard, can we just pick any standard or?
Yes. I recommend, well, you can't pick two because we're going to do two next term.
Okay.
So I would like you to pick, I recommend at least you pick a standard that you, if you remember back when you applied for the program, there was a transcript analysis that I did for you. And I probably gave you credit for one or more courses or one or more standards. Usually everybody gets something. I can usually, you all had initial licensure. So pick one of those to do because you may not encounter that, along the way. In class, so at least there's a good foundation for you to start. And you can always update it as we go, but it'll be useful for you to do it if you've got background in it.
And it's just one standard that we're doing.
Correct.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. Just one standard with that three-part system. That how are you approaching the standard? 3 to 5 paragraphs, 2 to 5 artifacts, and then a paragraph for each artifact explaining how they connect.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right. Doing my 5 seconds of wait time. See if there's any other. So now, why don't we take, this is probably a good time to take our break. So let's take our 5 and we'll come back and we will talk DIBELS.
Can I ask you a question about the other class when they all go on break?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Bring it on.
All right. So actually, it's not even about the other classes, it's about both classes.
Okay.
So when I conduct a comprehension interview, that's all meaning, I'm assuming, or it's not, because it's not structured, it's not visual, it's all 100% meaning.
It's all 100% meaning, except sometimes the student will use language from the book. Like, if they learn vocabulary, if it's a patterned book, I don't think your student would have, patterned book, but if they pick up those kind of things, you can say, well, there was a little structure there that they kind of took with them, because sometimes they'll talk in that formal kind of book way when they're talking about the book, they're using some of the language from the book. But for the most part, we're talking structure.
Okay, and so far
I mean,
I've
meaning.
done. Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
far, I've done all my comprehension interviews orally because I don't know, it's just easier
Yeah.
to do that.
No,
But
I agree.
for the next 2 lessons, I'm trying an experiment, kind of. I'm gonna give the question orally, but I'm gonna have her just write it out, and then I can use it for both meaning and structure,
Well, you could. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
and also visual, I guess, as well, depending on the words. Then I figure I can have then best of both worlds right there.
Well, yeah, do give that a try. I mean, I know the comprehension interview is kind of like a conversation.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a back and forth between you that can be useful, but I'd like to see report back to me how that works with the writing, because that is another
It's
way
gonna
to
be
get
one of my it's gonna be one of my roaming the known lessons because I want to see her writing skills because in class I have her do a lot of like typing and it auto corrects everything.
right.
So I want to see how she is pen on paper, all that good stuff.
Sweet.
And
Okay.
then I can figure out if she has really bad spelling. That could be a lesson down the line.
All righty. That sounds pretty good.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. We are back. Well, as people start to come back, we're going to, as I said, focus on DIBELS. The truth about DIBELS, what it is and what it does. Knowing that there is no real truth here. There's, well, you know, it's got some important questions to ask. So that's why we're going through, knowing that DIBELS is still around. What I'd like us to do is to start by, I'm going to divide you up into 4 rooms. And you guys, each room gets 1 or 2 of the short chapters that came after Goodman's very long chapter. And you guys are going to go through, kind of prepare, you know, knowing that everybody read this, you don't have to summarize it necessarily, but talk about, kind of remind us of the main points, so that we can have a conversation. And thinking about that your group will lead the conversation around that or those chapters. So kind of look for ahas or questions to ask the group as we go through. Does that make sense? All righty. So I discovered, by the way, that Zoom allowed me to rename all the rooms. So I put the chapter author as the name of the room. So the first group gets Flurky. So you might want to get out your table of contents here. Alan Flurky wrote What's Normal About Real Reading. And I hadn't realized he had such a funny name until I got to type it. So there it is. And then the second group will take Is DIBELS Leading Us Down the Wrong Path by Robert J. Tierney and Catherine Thorne. And then, oh, I'm sorry, Thome, I think. And then the third group is actually going to get 2 because they're short. How DIBELS Failed Alabama, a research report by Susan Say, I think. But Isn't DIBELS Scientifically Based by Sandra Wild. And then the last group is going to get DIBELS, Not Justifiable, the ending. All right. So you hopefully, and again, this is new for me, so let me know if it doesn't happen. Hopefully when it comes up and you see your room, and I'm gonna do that right now, it will tell you, it'll show you. Okay, good. All right, great. So then let's take about 15 minutes to prepare, and then come back and discuss. All right. Now, let's see. Why don't we begin at the beginning with Flurky? We've got Ash, Beth, and Sarah.
All right. So we started to talk about the fact that Dibbles and some program that I forgot what it was called that Sarah uses, like some progress monitoring, how it times students in their reading. And we felt that that was kind of like counterproductive because younger students, as we saw in the video that we watched earlier, really do take their time in trying to figure out how to pronounce a word or try to apply a strategy. And only giving them a certain amount of time to read really puts the pressure on them and in theory, like increasing the amount of mistakes that they make. If you remove that time constraint, you can actually sit there and see a student, figure out what strategies they're trying to use, and then, take those strategies and then work with them on those strategies. And then later in the future, when they're older, then you can start doing time tests, because as an older reader, that's when you start reading faster and becoming better.
Yeah, we kind of talked about how it seems to be done backwards. They're pushing such like fluency and the rate at which you read at younger grades when you need to learn all of those strategies to break apart a word and to predict in a text and to comprehend what you're reading to become a fluent reader. So it's like that's what they should be. I mean, that's what we are teaching in younger grades, like how to decode, how to predict, how to infer, all of that kind of stuff. But that's what should be the primary focus, not how quickly they can do it, because they need to master those before they can quickly read it.
And Dibbles also doesn't take into account different types of errors. So, the one part that jumped out in this chapter was the reading that they had coded of Blueberries for Sale with all of those mistakes in it. But it was actually read by an adult. And when you looked at the mistakes, the meaning was maintained. So none of us are actually accurately reading every word. Our brains are jumping ahead and guessing what's probably going to happen. And if we're, skilled readers, those mistakes don't matter because the meaning is there and we know, we're able to maintain the thread of the story. But Dibbles doesn't take that into account. An error is an error and it's counted against you regardless.
And so this is what's normal about real reading, right? So what about the rest of you? What's normal about real reading in your classes?
Well, I do read alouds often, and I feel like I'm self-correcting all the time. Like, just naturally, my brain thinks it's going to be that, and then I self-correct, and it's fine. If the kids don't have it in front of them, and I change A to the, do I always self-correct? No, because they're not going to know, and it's not going to change the meaning of what it is. So I feel like that's just kind of like, I don't want to say an adult move, but kind of, because you just figure it out. And as the teacher, my self-corrections to me in a middle school classroom also show my middle schoolers, hey, I'm not perfect either, and that's okay. And I think that's really important, especially in the middle school, for them to see, oh, she just made a mistake and she's okay correcting it.
And that's part of good reading.
Yeah.
So there's a voice from middle school. Anyone else?
I think at the elementary level, even just thinking about like the nonsense words, transferring that into writing, like many of our kids try to sound out words and use invented spelling. So to them, I mean, those are very real words when they read them in their writing because they sounded it out and they used the sounds that they knew. So now to say that that's not a real word and it's a nonsense, I think it confuses them.
Oh, that's a really good point. Thank you. All right, let's keep going. What about group 2, Tierney and Thome? Is Dibbles leading us down the wrong path?
Well, I'll start by, we kind of talked about how it says that Dibbles measures what teachers teach, what Dibbles measure and what teachers teach become the same. So it kind of reminded us basically like our teachers still teaching to the test. Like you start doing that with Dibbles and I feel like it really doesn't matter. You do that no matter what test it is. Like I said, when it comes to spring, as soon as, it's forward time, I start making questions that are very similar to forward or the content or whatever it be. So we kind of just made a connection there between, teachers teaching to what Dibbles is and what it's asking of the students. So.
And with that, like teachers are almost going to be, I don't want to say forced to teach to the test at some point, but that's kind of it. Okay, are you teaching to the Dibbles test or are you teaching to the state test? You're still going to have that always in education, I'm assuming. So therefore, it's just a different test. It was talking too about how different assessments value different things, like think about what Dibbles then is valuing. So keeping kind of that in mind. It was also talking about how like the gap then is just getting bigger because it's focusing on these things that we really need to be focusing on more, that then those gaps just keep getting bigger and bigger over time.
If we keep focus, if the assessments, so you're saying if the assessments,
if the assessments aren't aligning theoretically what's best for children's learning, then we're aligning to the assessments and we're not aligning to what kids need. Therefore, the gaps of what they need is just getting bigger and bigger. And I guess that's what we were kind of discussing. Like a question could be like, well, what do you feel like you're teaching to? Do you feel like you are teaching to genuinely the best interest of all kids? Or in spring, do you feel like you're teaching in the test? Because Danielle and I kind of admitted, we definitely do some test prep every spring because we feel like it's necessary. Yeah. And that's kind of sad. I completely admit that. But if that's if my teaching's being reflected upon, you kind of have to.
Yeah. How sending that question out? How do you?
I like the way she categorized it though, like test prep. You're keeping it practical. You can teach the child or the class holistically as much as you can throughout the year. And then when you need to prepare, some of those things have already been planted. But as you said, you can kind of categorize it as a kind of test prep to be practical. That was a good way of like seeing it or viewing it.
So they know formats and things like that. So what about the rest of you? How big of a difference do the tests make for your classes? Do they guide? Are they first of all, are they aligned with what you're supposed to be doing? I mean, I should say, are they aligned with the standards you're supposed to be going by? Second, are they aligned with what you think is good, well, for our purposes, good literacy practices?
In kindergarten, the only two official tests that we use are PALS, and then we do the Fountas and Pinnell benchmarking. I do think those both are accurate depictions of what we are teaching and what we want them to learn. The one thing that this was just a school and an administrative decision this year was we actually decided this first quarter not to do Fountas and Pinnell testing at the beginning of the year. And that was really nice to explain to parents. First of all, it was just a big fat waste of time because they all pretty much were failing an A at the beginning of the year. So it was just us all testing them for them to be all on the same level. And then it was a 1 or a 2 on a report card that says reading that automatically worries the parent. Oh. So that was something that like we just decided this quarter that we were just going to bypass that. So that was nice.
Because it was an inappropriate benchmarker for them.
It was. It just, we felt like they weren't ready and it wasn't developmentally appropriate yet to include that on the report card and frighten the parents and set the kids up to think that they're not doing well when they're just not ready yet.
Alyssa, did just kindergarten skip it or everyone?
Just kindergarten. Because, I mean, of all the times, this is only my third year, so I've only done it 3 times, but most of the kids are either on an A or a pre-A anyway, so what's the point if they're all pretty much on the same level? Besides the kid that's already on a D, which isn't, you know what I mean? That's not really fair.
It's not representative for sure. So how do tests, I know I was in a district early in this, in NCLB, where our superintendent said, guys, teach to the test. We have to. That's the way of it. If we don't, well, in Florida, where I was, if you didn't do well as a school, they would actually come in, fire the teachers and the principal, and bring in a whole new staff and reorganize everything. So, you taught to the test, and that's part of, I think, why some of those early pieces, people were cheating on tests because you make them so high stakes like that, where and make it kind of disconnected from what we were doing before, that it didn't make any sense. So I could see that. I see that. I think maybe, and you'll have to tell me, maybe testing has changed a little bit, in that they've tried to make it more helpful for classes, for planning. Is that the case?
I think it depends on the test, in my opinion, because like I can see like maps, it'll tell me the strand. So, you know, are you good at nonfiction versus language versus whatever? But my poor children are still tested to death. Like I honestly feel so bad that you're doing this. You're doing maps 3 times a year, and we do the Badger, and we used to do ACT 3 times a year. And then we have monthly, and it's just too much. And then we do running records, and I would love to add up the minutes because it's an insane total that is just like, wow.
Yeah, and that was an argument that we made too, was that most of our grades in general are one-on-one testing, even for report cards in kindergarten, because they don't take tests. They're not like submitting assignments, so you have your anecdotal notes and that's it. So we told them, like, we're losing like 10 weeks a year on just testing. It was like, it takes 2 weeks for benchmarking 3 times a year. It takes a week at least for report cards, then PALs. It was like an obscene amount of instruction that you lose out on.
And that's probably light. I mean, I know 10 weeks would be lighter than what I did back in the day.
Yeah, no, it is. It's exhausting, the amount. I feel the same as like Lydia, that my kids are completely tested out. And again, it seems counterintuitive. Like the worse off the school is doing. I mean, it's kind of no secret in MPS that our avenue has a bad rep for being academically like behind. So the worse you are on the report card, the MPS report card, like the school report card, the more tests you better be doing to like show that they're making gains. But it's backwards. I was like, that's not what they need. They don't need any more tests.
Test as instruction.
Yeah, so we have to do the STAR test, which is basically the same as maths. But so they have to do that 3 times a year, but when they're not doing it 3 times a year, they have to progress monitor with it every single week. And they have to take that test every single week. Reading 1 week, math the next, reading the next week, math the next, and then they have to track where they're going, like on a color.
What is that data used for? So taking it every other week or whatever, what do you do with it?
Exactly. So that's where I think the district fails tremendously, because the district's like, here, do this, watch your data, but then actually doesn't teach any of us what to do with it. So STAR does have a lot of there are a lot of things. You can create assessments, you can create assignments, you can do there's instructional planning things based on what it's seen, but you have to figure that all out on your own because no
That's
one's going to tell you how to use it.
crazy.
And
Like
how
we
much
only
is this-
progress monitor, I think it's once a month, maybe for OnStar. So, because I can't, and I wonder, like, if when I look at our scores, the progress monitoring compared to like what it actually their normal STAR score is, there's a big difference. I feel like. So I wonder how accurate some of these things are. I guess.
Absolutely, yes. And they also get tested out. I mean, they're
Yes.
literally they're progress monitoring every single week. It's almost impossible to get them to sit down and want to take their winter STAR test. They're like, why? I've done this 15 times since September. I don't want to do it again.
There's accountability and there's accountability. When is the teaching, right? Okay, interesting. These are some great questions. So why don't we continue this conversation? Well, let's pull it through to the next group. They had 2 chapters, the Say, See, and Wild chapters, which are called, it says how Dibbles failed Alabama, a research report, and then, but isn't Dibbles scientifically based? By Sandra Wild.
So that was our section. Basically, Alabama adopted Dibbles, hoping to improve reading scores, but however, it failed. And some quotes that we took out of the book is that the stopwatch shouldn't be a prerequisite for teaching. And they actually said that for the Dibbles test, that they were the best measure for assessing comprehension, but it doesn't really assess comprehension. It assesses fluency.
That's true.
So our question was kind of 2-part. One, how would a school system determine what is the most effective form of assessment for reading without being, and it's kind of a vague question, without being biased by what's popular at the time. So we kind of wanted to put that out there, like how do school systems determine the type of assessments to use? And then like who are the people that partake in determining that?
So let's pause there. Oh, yeah, let's pause there.
Without being biased by what's popular at the time. So we just kind of thought we'd throw that out there for ideas to share with one another.
What do you think? And I interrupted. Why don't you read that again?
How would a school system determine what is the most effective form of assessment for reading in general without being biased by what's popular? And then who would be the people that could potentially help make those decisions? It's kind of a general question, but.
I think people that have like a huge influence in choosing our literacy assessments that we use are our instructional coaches. I know back last year it was changed that we were going to start using certain parts of PALS more and things like that. So our instructional coaches have a huge influence on the assessments that we use, at what grade levels we use them, and then also just how often we do just some progress monitoring. They give guidelines on when we should be doing running records, and I feel like our instructional coaches are very good about spacing things out, and I don't have a lot of the feelings that everyone else has. I don't feel like we're really pressured to do a lot of assessments. It seems like things are done in a very timely manner, and I'm not always assessing. So yeah, if they come about at the right times, I'm not overwhelmed with them. My kids aren't overwhelmed with them, or they don't even know that they're really assessments. So yeah, but our instructional coaches play a huge role in the pacing of that, and then
I think that's a good point, that that's something recent with having instructional coaches that can be like a liaison between administration and the teachers. And then a lot of times instructional coaches have been in the classroom, so they know, the day-to-day and how the classes are managed and what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. So that's something recent and new. I think that's kind of like, I'm not sure if they totally like determine as far as the school system goes, but I know where I worked, the instructional coach just recently got some early readers from me that she wanted to divvy up between the classrooms. So she played a real, hands-on approach, and she wanted to get the classrooms more leveled reading books. So that's kind of like the bottom-up approach. I just wonder how the school systems in general determine. I guess they base it off of the most researched assessment that's out there. But then
I would love to actually know how my district decides, to be honest with you, because we have two directors of curriculum directors of teaching and learning. One is K-6, one is 7-12 or something along those lines. And we're just told, like the last 2 years, we did ACT 3 times a year, the middle school version. And then every month we'd give them an interim. And the monthly ones were slightly useless because the kids did not care at all. It was just click, click, click till I'm done. And after 2 years of it, somehow they decided we're never doing ACT again. Staff was never asked. It was just very interesting that, like, we have coaches. We have math coaches. We have literacy coaches. We're a very, well-trained district, but yet I don't know as an average teacher how those decisions are made. I don't. Maybe they talk to our coaches, but we didn't have much input. And now, instead of just doing MAPS once a year, now we're doing it 3 times a year. And that changed this year, but I don't know how that's decided, in all honesty. We were just kind of told, here's what's happening.
I guess part of the question is just like, who do you all think should be partaking in the decision making? And it's kind of like a rhetorical kind of question, which is obvious, but.
I don't know. I don't want to like call out on Anna because Anna works at the same school, but she's in the middle school, so it might be totally different. But I do feel like maybe I'm just lucky that our curriculum coordinator and our administrators, at least, we're technically in the preschool. I really think they do take our opinions into account. And maybe we're just lucky in that way. But obviously, I would think that the people on the front line would have the best opinion about it.
I think that's mostly true for the middle school as well. Today we got our school report card. Did you hear about that, Alyssa?
No, they usually bring that up at like our monthly preschool meeting with Pasquale.
So that was just something that we learned today, and we exceeded expectations, and that hasn't happened for like many, many years. And I don't know, I was just wondering like what even goes into that? I know it's about the population, and I know it's about the forward scores, but it's like just like a lot of hidden data. The forward doesn't give a lot of data that we can really use. It's just like, what are you graded as? I don't know. So that just goes back to the last conversation about like, are tests really helpful or not? But
I know it seems I'm sorry. It seems like, because they do bring it up in like, I know Santiago brings it up in like our all school meetings. He'll like pull up the data and pull up the scores. And as a school, like we'll sit and we'll think of solutions, and we'll think of like, I think at the beginning of this year, what did we like make goals or something to change it? So it seems like they're really trying to take us into account.
Yeah, I agree.
And so apparently that's not how all of, some feel.
Well, I should speak up and at least vouch for my district, because we got a report card, a month ago when we couldn't tell people. And we did the same exact thing. We had Post-it notes of plus delta of what we can do to improve and this and that. And that too. It's now more, what are you going to do with all those comments? And I'm not an admin. I don't know the answers. And now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's because staff was literally griping about the ACT for 2 years that they're finally like gone with it. But to me, you don't go from like gung-ho every single month to just completely gone and that's where we don't know. So I'm just still like, there has to be more than we are aware, because to me, to go from everything to nothing is a big jump. Yes, we complained a lot, I will be totally honest, so maybe our complaints did something, but I don't know.
But if they were worthy of taking that much time at the beginning, I mean, yeah, I think that's your point. Why
would you be so invested in it and then all of a sudden just give up on it?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
It sounds like there's a communication lack there. So it's good questions. I will say sometimes I know some, for at least for a long time, a lot of administrators were feeling like they were being asked to solve the reading issues in their school, the testing, especially the gap, the gap between scores between people of color and people and kind of white heterogeneous first language English, et cetera, on running. So, and low income people. So I know that they were getting a lot of pressure, and they were going, I mean, they'd come to me even and say, what do you have that you can prove works? I'm like, prove works for every kid? Well, I can tell you I've got something that is researched and strong, but I couldn't say there's a guarantee behind it, right? You just don't guarantee kids, you know? Does it have a lot I believe in? Okay, sure, you know. But they were looking for a program that would say it was guaranteed. And there were programs out there that said that. And that's what they chose, because they figured, oh, well, they must know if they guarantee them. And really it was probably, you know, more of a sales pitch than really based on research and things like that. I remember, and I don't know if that's what's going on, you know, because basically the wrong people were being saddled with the decision. They weren't going to their reading people in the districts at that point, or at least from a lot of the districts. I'm sure there were some districts that were doing it, but at that point it seemed like they were pushing administrators to be the ones to make those decisions. It sounds like in at least several schools that's not happening. There's several districts here represented here. You know, MPS being so big, it's really hard to get those Post-it notes to the people when you have 120 some schools or whatever it is now.
The second part was more about statistics, which I love, but
oh, do you? Good for you.
Yeah, but so basically it was saying that the children that were in the middle area, the sum area, didn't need the intervention. The children that were successful, of course, didn't need it, but just the children that were weak needed it. And so we were both saying that the children that were in the middle area needed some type of help and assistance also. So that those statistics weren't quite accurate and weren't meeting the needs of the children in the middle section. So
they were just breaking them out.
Right. So as far as that goes, statistics wise, I don't know, did we really think of Anna, did we think of a question for that? I think we got to that point. And
really,
well, I guess what I would say is, you know, like, how do statistics play a part in, like, how accurate and how can we really determine if statistics are a true reflection of what the students are doing in the classroom and how much should they, and I think that's just an ongoing argument and question, how much should they weigh on what the teachers do? Do they really align with what's going on in the classroom and what the students are achieving? But with the DIBELS test in particular, are those statistics seem to be skewed a little bit and not quite accurate, like not accurately reflect what the students need. So I don't know if I asked a true question, but
We kind of answered it at the end. It's sort of, is it really what they need?
Right.
And I would, it something you said at the beginning that has always rings with me in this book is the idea that they brought in an assessment to raise reading scores. And it reminds me of something, oh gosh, what was this on? I think it might have been on South Park, that little cartoon where they had underpants gnomes. I don't know if you ever saw this, but
South Park.
What? Was it South Park?
South Park.
The underpants gnomes. They'd run around and they'd get all the underpants at night. They were stealing underpants. And they were like, we're going to get all the underpants. And they had this plan. And they were like, I don't remember what it was, big plan to take over it was like, 1, get all the underpants. 2, ? 3, take over the world or something like that. I don't know. And it's that middle section. 1, buy a fairly expensive assessment program. Then ? Leads to success. I mean, it seems like there's something missing there. And maybe what was missing, I think, Sarah, you mentioned, was it you? I think, who said, that you get all this data and then you have to figure out, okay, what does it mean? What can I do with it? What does it mean for my instruction? And if you don't, if you're not terribly skilled at reading, you may not have a lot of avenues to take. I don't know, just reminds me. Seems like there's something missing. So why don't we, I find myself talking again. So why don't we go to the Manning, Emmy, and Cato one, the last one.
So I think here the authors are just arguing that the two sections of DIBELS that they have looked at, the phoneme segmentation fluency and the nonsense word fluency, just aren't accurate representations of what real reading and writing is. It's only a really small snapshot into what it is. And really, when you think about those two skills, it really is how fast can you recall letter sounds to read a word, and then how fast can you listen to letter sounds to then segment the word. And that's only a very small snapshot into reading. So I guess they pose the question, what are the larger skills that should be focused on, and what assessment might show the accurate representation of all the skills that reading and writing encompass.
Yeah, and what was interesting was it didn't have a connection. It didn't show that they were better readers because of taking these assessments. And I mentioned that, honestly, especially with the nonsense word fluency, that to me, that just kind of would confuse my kids. Because when they're trying to decode a word, like my example was if they were trying to decode cat, but they said cat, they would think, oh, that's not a real word. It has to be cat, or cot, I guess, is a real word too, or cut. There's a lot of vowels that could fit there. But it just, to me, it confuses, it mixes things up for them. And I also, with the phoneme segmentation, that would be like, you'd say the word sat, oh wait, did I just mix those up? No, wait, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I remember. You say the word sat, and they're supposed to go sat, which I said also would confuse them because we work so much with syllables, and I have so many kids going sat, sat, and I feel like taking it apart that way is almost, it kind of is contradicting other skills that they need to work on.
And I think a big part of that article too was one of the things you mentioned, like that all of these things were supposed to be predicting reading achievement in a broader scale, and just these little measures, and that perhaps they didn't do quite that, you know. And I understand that, you know, being fluent in some skills is important, because some of these skills, because that shows that you really know it, if you can do it quickly and easily and automatically and everything. And that's useful in its own right, in its own place. But what they were using it for wasn't, it sounds like from what Alyssa's saying, isn't connecting up to what they're doing in the classroom. So when it's not connecting up to what it's doing in the classroom, that means it's not a valid assessment. A valid assessment measures what it's supposed to measure. You know, is the student learning the things that they're supposed to be learning? And so it wouldn't be valid for that classroom. And so anyway, use is a big key. It's come up a lot here.
What is the original question again?
I don't know if there was one.
Oh, okay. That's why I missed it.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I'm just riffing on this. Okay.
Earlier, someone said, I think it was Ash, that he was wondering if reading the timed passages would be better for older students. And I'm thinking about those nonsense, those made up words. And I wonder if that would be something that my 7th graders would be ready for, or if it would also confuse them. I think it would confuse the student that I'm tutoring, that I showed last week. But others, but it's like, what's the point at that age? Do they really need to? I don't know. It's just weird to me.
No, they probably don't really need to. I don't really see the point either.
Well, and I think there are some important questions being asked. First, you know, if you have an assessment, it should be answering a question you need to answer, right? So you need to find an assessment that does what you want it to do, not look for an assessment that's going to solve all your reading problems, because like that doesn't even make any sense. So, you know, use assessments for what they're supposed to be used for. Choose carefully. You know, look for, you know, if you've got an assessment that is supposed to be progress monitoring, it should be linked up to the instruction that it's monitoring. There should be kind of a feedback loop there, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If it's not, then it's kind of, it doesn't have as much relevance, and maybe doesn't serve the purpose that you want it to serve. So, you know, and for a long time, I think, I'm just going to get on my soapbox a little bit. I think schools and teachers and education in general has been a little taken advantage of, because we really didn't understand what a valid, reliable assessment meant and how to use assessments. I think we've all been schooled in a lot of ways about, okay, assessments can compare norms across the population. They can show growth and chart growth. They can be, you know, summative or formative. They can be formal or informal. There's so many, I think, assessment types that, you know, and they can measure a whole variety of things. But you've got to make sure that the assessment matches the need, that you start with the question, how do we find out blah? And then you find the assessment that matches. If you want to grade a school, you're not going to use the same assessments that you would to chart growth in a student, right? You're going to compare the school maybe to, and again, this is, how do you grade a school? There's another question. You have to define the parameters there. So are you grading one school by comparing it to the one next door? Or is that unfair? You've always got to know what you're trying to measure before you choose an assessment. You can't just choose it. Well, someone said, don't just choose it because it's popular. It might be popular because it measures something that a lot of people want measured, but doesn't fit here. So be a critical consumer of, and hopefully all of you will be involved in choosing and guiding your assessment protocols for your districts in the future. I think reading people ought to be involved in that process and asking those questions and finding those answers. Right. Very nice. Thank you all for your input and your frustrations, and for your hard work and with children. So let's take the 5-er and come back, and we will finish up. Alrighty, let's come on back. So I'd like to talk about your December report. I know that's a little far ahead at this point, but I know that some of you are starting to come somewhat close to the end of your tutoring. I think you might be. So I think I have a couple of people on lesson 4 or 5 at this point. So I wanted to show you the end game. So in your and I don't know if any of you know this actually, but all of your assignments are actually are linked in this assignment tab over here on the left-hand side. If you click on that, you can see absolutely everything.
Quick question. Like for today's lesson plan, at least this afternoon, I wasn't able to like attach the document.
Oh, okay, that's something different. And today is 3?
Yes.
2, yes. Okay. It is probably, let me see. You know what? I think wait, because of this online, because I keep forgetting to do these file uploads. PDF if you need JPEGs. See. All right. That's what I screwed up. All right. See if it works now. See what you see for lesson plan 3.
Yep, now it works. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've been forgetting to do that one little piece, and so I will go back and do those. Down here is the last piece, the tutoring December report. And so that in your syllabus, it describes it as a project designed to serve as an overall reflection and analysis of the entire tutoring experience, including assessments and instruction, and focusing on MSV as an organizing tool. Tutors are expected to incorporate readings on research and theory, like we've done all through class, referencing those, and as well as ways in which issues of diversity and discrimination were involved in the students' labeling as struggling if they were there. We've been talking about what are the issues involved. Now, I don't want to lead you. Diversity and discrimination aren't the only reasons for a student to be struggling, but those are some of the ones that we might pop up with. A plan for instructing the students and monitoring his or her progress must be included, also including references to support your argument. And really, I've got a larger document that I think is going to be more useful. And it should look really familiar because it's meant to mimic your assessment profile report. So it starts off with introducing the student. You can just cut and paste that paragraph just so that I remember who your student is in terms of your basics. And then you're going to talk about the ZAD again, the zone of actual development, with a paragraph at least for MSMV, just like you did for your assessment profile. And then you're going to identify your students' strengths and weak Q areas. Finally, you're going to address the ZPD, listing 5 partial knowns that you can base instruction on. And really all of this as a purpose. It's meant to, I could have had a pre and a post, right? so that you have to do your assessment battery again here at the end, and you're going to compare. But I thought that might not be as useful as just because you're going to have to do it again when we come back in January. And it may be with the same student. So I thought that assessment is going to be more useful for planning instruction. This would just be a summative kind of thing. And I don't think that's going to be very useful for our class. It's not going to get us where we need to go. Again, what's the purpose? So what I'd like you to do is to do this looking at your lessons with an assessment eye, right? There's kind of your teachers, you're always assessing all the time. And that's part of where it's hard to break a deficit model, because you're always trying to figure out what's the next step. What does the student know? What do I need to teach them? And so I want you to write it down, basically, what you've learned about your students through instruction, because I think you learn even more about them during that time than you do from any assessment. So try to document, what does my student know? What is, what are the next steps in the ZPD as we go off on a break here. And then when we come back, you'll do the assessment battery again, but you'll have this to kind of as a placeholder to remember where you were. It might have shifted some, but it should still be useful. And of course, the last question is speculate on why the student is labeled as struggling with reading, just like we've said all through. So you see how that works, how it fits, what I'm looking for?
Quick question for like the last two, for 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
Are you expecting it to be different than the assessment portfolio or profile, literacy profile we made? Because
well, it could be. First of all, there's been a couple months, and you teach the young ones. There could be just a week later, sometimes a kid will drastically change. You just never know when it's just gonna hit them, right? But but it might not be. I mean, it kind of depends on the kid's trajectory. Learning is kind of a zigzaggy line. It's not a straight line. So I wouldn't expect, especially after 6 lessons, that there would be a huge growth. If there is, that's fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of time, really. 6 weeks is a lot of time. And maybe there is. That would be fantastic. Let's document that, chart it, document that's occurred, or any changes. Like maybe the student was really focused on visual at the beginning, and by the end they're really focused on meaning, and now kind of slipping over their visual that used to be a strength or something. If that's what's happening, you want to document it before you go off and forget it all. But yeah, it could be that your student is really, that you were able to get a really accurate picture of the student from the assessments, and that's just verified along the way. And in that case, you'll want to document that as well.
Can you just clarify, when you talk about identifying at least 5 partial knowns, what do you mean by partial knowns?
Yes. So, because everything's a partial known, right? I mean, how many real knowns are there out there? So, what I mean is that I should start with what I don't want. Let's start with a non-example. What I don't want is that it to become a list of all the kinds of things a kid doesn't know. Because we can start with organic chemistry and we can go, there's just a whole lot that the kid doesn't know. So I want them to have some knowledge that will provide kind of the stepping stone from there. And that's what I mean by partial known. And ideally, it should be in their weak area, that you find a known to base it on that's in their weak area, because that's where you want that growth to happen. But, you know, thinking about their weak area, like Hannah was saying, the weak area in one sense isn't their weak area in another sense. Like if you look at during reading, it's different than after reading. So it might be more complicated than just a pick a cue kind of thing. All righty. So if you're comfortable with that, I think we can finish up for tonight. I know you guys would hate to go a little early. I'm sure I owe you tons of time. But I think we've had a great discussion, and I think, I know we're going to have the presentations next time where we talk about the portfolios, and we'll focus on those for a little bit. But when we come back the next week, we're going to be talking a lot about standardized testing. And I think the discussion here has started that discussion that we will be continuing then. So don't forget about this. We're going to need it in, well, golly, in about 3 weeks. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Stay safe. And I hope you get to spend time with people you love. All right, even if it's on Zoom. I've definitely done that Thanksgiving dinner. So thank you all. Let me know how I can help. I'll hang around for anybody who needs me.
Tanya, I was just looking at my grades and it doesn't affect it too much, but I noticed that it said I wasn't Halloween